Honey, baby, sweetie. Yeah, it's your dear old Uncle Wags. I haven't seen you since that tray of kamikazes we stared down after Soane.
Jared! Yeah. It's actually Bobby Axelrod. Sure. You can call me Ax if it makes you feel good.
Ax and Wags working the phones, whispering sweet, sweet somethings into a bunch of dudes' ears. Now I know we all wish we could be buttered up by some billionaires, but why are Ax and Wags doing it? That's what we're going to talk about in this video. But before you watch this, make sure you go check out that last video we did on dark pools, because it explains what's going on in this episode and what situation they're in. Because this is right after Grigor attacked them and everything was shut down. And when all your technology is gone, you got to start kicking it old school. And it's crazy because with Prime Brokers, which is what Ax and his team uses, you could actually pick up a phone and call them. I know I haven't made a phone call in years. I barely talk to anyone. You could tell by all my friends. But yeah, this amazing phone technology is something you won't find on your Robinhood app. Nope, this is the benefit you get with a Prime Broker. So Prime Broker is an investment bank that offers concierge services to hedge funds in the form of securities lending for short sales, margin provision, trade order execution, and custodianship of securities. So if you remember in the show, Spartan Ives is AxCap's Prime Broker. And you guys know Spartan Ives with Lawrence Boyd right here, who Ax eventually screwed over. Ax got him arrested instead of Ax and sent Lawrence here, where he became a custodian to work off his debt to society. But while he was in this position is when he started working with Chuck to set up that ice juice trap for Ax. And you guys remember that really got Ax into a corner. Yep, Lawrence Boyd pulled off that old Andy Bernard from janitor to superstar trick. Classic play. But yeah, Prime Brokers are pretty important if you're a hedge fund because you put all your trades and everything through them and they're supposed to take care of you. You get a lot more services and you get taken care of a lot better than someone like you or me that is just using a smaller account on one of these online brokerages. But of course, the reason why we're using the online brokerages is because it's cheap, right? Or even Robinhood is free. But if it's cheaper or free, you're not going to get the same service that you would at a Prime Broker. But you probably don't need that anyway. But Prime Brokerages are great. They take care of you. You can call them anytime. And I'm sure Wags has called them a few times drunk at 4 in the morning with that classic line, "Hey girl, you up?" If they're your Prime though, they should take that call because that's your ride or die bottom broker. Always there for you. In theory. In the show, Wendy also mentions how Prime Brokers are used by big fund.
Why is everyone sitting here dumbstruck like they're at frickin' Cirque du Soleil?
I'd like to help, but I've never made a voice trade in my life. None of us have. We don't know how.
What about a big trade, a sensitive one? Those have to happen by phone.
Mafee did them.
You know, I understand Ben Kim being too young to have ever made a phone-in trade, but Dollar Bill, he's kind of old. You would think he called in a trade once or twice. But yes, the big sensitive trades, those are done over the phone because you can't trust technology. You don't want to fat finger anything because you know you've heard those stories of the one stupid analyst at the bank that pushed the wrong button, lost the company $1 billion. That stuff does happen. So large sensitive trades go straight over the phone. Now, all these people that Ax and Wags are calling, I mean, that's not all their Prime Brokers, because you usually have one Prime Broker, right? But they're basically calling around to different desks at different banks, seeing how many shares they can take. And this shows examples of what big brokers can do. So for example, they could function as a dark pool.
I'm sitting on $500,000 Bay Pipeline, and I want to exit quick and silent as Le Samurai. The old French movie. Never mind.
They can keep your lots on the down low. See, nowadays when we think about markets, we think, okay, you have to go through an exchange. But technically, I could go to you or anybody else and be like, hey, do you want to buy 2 shares of Apple from me? And we could make that transaction happen off the exchange. Eventually, it would have to be reported, but private transactions can happen, which is the same thing you could do when you call a broker. Don't even have to use a dark pool algo or dark pool exchange. But why would these brokers be doing all this for Ax and company? Well, obviously, this is billions, right? They do it for the money because the more business they get and the more business they do for hedge funds, the more commissions they rack up, which is how they make money. And as you'll see in the next example, the more perks they get. And that's why Ax and Wags were sweet talking on the phone.
And the next time I get a good call, you're getting it too. Go out and buy yourself a longer boat come bonus time.
How much can you take? 150. Put on your fucking hard hat and I'll get your commission 5 cents a share instead of 3. 250 is a lot better. Sure. You and me at the open. And my box on Arthur Ashe.
They get promised stuff like more business in the future, which leads to bigger bonuses for the broker who's pulling that in. You get perks like going to the US Open with Axe. And Axe was even offering higher commissions per share. Now they still had to sweet talk them because they're unloading a lot of shares. And a lot of these brokerages are playing the role of market makers. So a market maker is just a person or a firm that buys and sells stocks for its own account. And their primary goal is to make money off the bid and ask spread. Market makers are basically middlemen. They buy and sell a bunch of shares and they always have some on hand. So once an order is received from a buyer, the market maker immediately sells off his position of shares from his own inventory to complete the order. So you might think that when you want to sell shares, there's another buyer lined up buying it directly from you. But how it actually works most of the time is that there's a market maker that sits in between the buyer and seller. So if you want to buy shares, you end up buying it from this market maker who's sitting there and providing shares for everyone. So you buy it from him and then he refills his stock from the seller. So this is good. I mean, this is a good function because these market makers, they provide liquidity in the market. So you don't have to worry about not having someone on the other side to buy from you because you usually have that market maker sitting right there to facilitate whatever trade you want. Now, when times are bad and liquidity is drying up, there's a crisis. Now you can't even depend on the market makers. Things go flat, right? But for most of the time, they're there for you. And they do this again to make money. They're just not doing a public service. This is finance, damn it. No one does anything for free or for the good of anybody. I'm kidding. That's not true. Like I was saying, they make money through that bid-ask spread. So when you go look at prices for a stock, you might see a bid price for $100 and then an ask price for $100.05. So this means that the broker himself is purchasing the stock for $100 and then selling it to a buyer for $100.05. And they're just pocketing that 5 cents in the process. So the more shares floating around and the more liquid something is, the smaller this bid-ask spread will be. So instead of 5 cents, it might be 1 cent. But because these market makers do such high volume trading, meaning they're moving so many shares back and forth doing their job, small spreads add up to large daily profits for them because they're getting 5 cents on every share, right? And here, let me give one more example in case this bid ask is kind of confusing. So say you wanted to buy a share of Apple. Well, you would be looking at the ask price. What are people selling it for? And people in this case is the market maker, right? So you would have to buy it for $100.05. But say then a second later you decided you didn't want that Apple share anymore and you wanted to sell it right away. Well, you would think that you could sell it for $100.05, what you just bought it for a second ago, right? But no, even if you turned it around and say even a millisecond, so you bought it for this much, you would still have to sell it for this much, just $100, and you would lose that 5 cents because the bid, which is what people are bidding for it or what the market maker is saying he'll buy it for, is only 100. Difference of 5 cents. You lose out on that, but the market maker keeps it. As long as the spreads are tight, meaning you're only paying a few cents, then I think it's a good deal because the market maker is providing that liquidity service. He can take that few cents for payment. But anyway, the reason Axe and Wags had to sweet talk them a little bit is because market makers got to be smart, right? They don't want to be holding too many shares of anything because then they can't move them. And then they're stuck with them if the price drops too much, right? So when Axe is calling someone and saying, listen, I got 500,000 shares that I need you to take off my hands. Well, that's kind of a big ask because the market maker is sitting there being like, listen, I don't need that many shares. I don't want to be stuck holding the bag when shit hits the fan. So that's why he's like, okay, let me increase the commissions that we're going to pay you. I'm going to send you a bunch of business. I'm going to take you to some cool places because I'm a billionaire and you're not. So eventually they're like, all right, I'll make it work. I don't think they made it work though with what happened with the tanker explosion. So that's basically what was happening with all the phone calling. It was an old school manual process because all their systems went down. As far as the natural gas trade itself, for that part, I understand that they were getting out of all the companies that produce the natural gas, like the stock, because if there's a huge natural disaster, all those companies' stock prices will take a hit. But if they were long natural gas itself, like in the futures market, I would expect that if there is a huge explosion with a bunch of tankers, that should disrupt supply, right? So less supply should send prices way up. So I mean, they didn't go into these details, but if Axe had natural gas futures, I'm sure he would have hung on to them or even buy more. Because the other question I had about this trade was, why are they trying to unload so much instead of just hedging some too? And hedging means taking the opposite position to provide some insurance, you know? So if you know all your natural gas stocks are gonna plummet because of this tanker explosion, then maybe buy more natural gas futures. So the big position of your natural gas going up should offset the big position of your stocks going down. And you could do the same thing with options. They could have bought some put options on all those stocks. And puts, remember, are the right to sell. So you can buy a put contract and have the right to sell at $100, so if the thing drops to 80, you're okay, because you can still sell at 100. But maybe I'm wrong here, maybe I didn't understand the full situation, but honestly, I just don't think they went into that much detail, because why would they? You didn't really need it for the story. But if you got an idea about how they should have hedged that or taken care of that position, comment down below. Let me hear your thoughts. And of course, put down your suggestions of what else I should cover on this show. And if you want more Billions content just like this episode where I break down the finance aspect of each episode, then check out this playlist. We do a bunch of them. I'm covering every episode this season, so you can catch up on the old ones. And if you want to see the new ones, then subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell so you get an email notification when they come out. I'm doing it for every episode. I'm a little behind, sorry. But subscribe so you will get them when they come out. All right, I'll see you in the next video. Stay fallible out there. Bye.